Hey guys, Tammy here, and in this video I'm going to talk about 3 ways that you can prove narcissism in court. Now, I'm not saying these are the only 3 ways. I'm just saying these are 3 of the more common ways. As lay people, we have to understand that we cannot diagnose. The court does not see us as an expert to be able to diagnose narcissism, but sometimes when it is having a major impact on our children, we need to be able to get that evidence into court. Let me just remind you, if you like this content, don't forget to hit like on the video. Also subscribe to the channel so that you get notified as new videos are released. And please feel free, as always, to share this on social media. When we're talking about narcissism, I think most of you have heard, don't ever use that term in court, right? That's just one of the big no-nos of dealing with a narcissistic person. But what the court looks at is patterns of behavior. And when we're talking about this, these have to be really extreme situations. Most of us that are dealing with a narcissistic person that's, somewhere on kind of the spectrum of narcissism, the vast majority of us, unfortunately, the situation doesn't, excuse me, I had a little hiccup there. The situation doesn't rise to the level of actually being able to reduce the other parent's parenting time. And it's unfortunate, but it's just kind of a fact of it. And honestly, I've had therapists that say sometimes even when you can, it will a lot of times make it worse for the child, because when that parent has reduced parenting time, they'll actually put more pressure on the child than they would if they had 50-50. Okay, so just something to think about. Let you roll that around in your mind a little bit. But when we do feel like it is a very extreme situation, and I would say I've probably seen this extreme enough for it to really have an impact in the court, probably less than half a dozen times during the entire 15 years or so that I've been doing this. Okay, so it is a very small percentage. The vast majority of us have to just deal with these things through the way we communicate, the way we act, the way we react, all those kinds of things, the way we handle the issues with the children, all of that. That's usually your first line of defense for the vast majority of people. And I talk about all that kind of stuff on the channel. But when we are in a situation where we need to get it into court, there's usually only about 3 ways that you can even get these types of behaviors in. And again, think about it from the perspective of the patterns of behavior that are damaging to the children. That's what we're trying to show. It's not necessarily the label of narcissism, right? The court doesn't view it in that perspective, okay? Because again, somebody could be diagnosed narcissistic and not necessarily be severe enough for it to be damaging children at the level enough for the court to feel like it's enough to, reduce parenting time or do something severe like that. But one of the ways is you can request a psych eval of that person. So if you really think that they're on the narcissism, they would qualify as NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, and you think it's really extreme, and it's extreme enough that it is having permanent emotional damage to your children, to the extent to where the children would be better off without that parent or with less time with that parent, then one of your routes is a psych eval. So a psych eval is usually you have to request it from the court and ask that the judge order it. And it is usually ordered for one person. Usually when we're doing a psych eval, we're only doing it on one of the parents. So you would request it on the other parent. And a lot of times if you are requesting it, you're the one's going to end up footing the bill for it many times. Not always. There's different ways courts deal with this. Sometimes it's one party. Sometimes it's the other, depending on who earns the money. Sometimes they split it. Sometimes they do it based on who's requesting it. There's all kinds of different ways that the court handles this in various situations. But a psych eval is not going to be a cheap thing. It's usually going to run you, at best, probably anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000. Okay. But that is one option. The second thing that I see happen in a lot of these cases is that an attorney will be appointed for the children. Now, in some states, that may sometimes be paid for a period of time. It might be supplemented. You might get a reduced rate on the attorney's hourly rate because they are working kind of hand in hand with the state. But that's not always true. A lot of times, and especially here in California, that cost is just divided between the parents. So they're splitting the cost of it, and there's an attorney for the children involved. So now we're paying 3 attorneys, not just 2, assuming that both parties have attorneys, okay? But this can be a great way, especially I think if you have teenagers and like preteens, children that are really old enough to verbalize kind of the behaviors, how it impacts them, the different things that transpire within the household, all of that kind of stuff. If they're being talked to about the litigation, if one parent is being talked negatively about by the other parent, those types of things are issues that are good for an attorney for the children to be handling. And also, if your child has their own preferences about where they want to live or what they want to, how much time they want to spend with each parent and what kind of parenting schedule they want, especially when I see like 15, 16, 17-year-olds, the court usually weighs their opinion a little more heavily. And so those are good ages for an attorney for the children to be involved. And it keeps your children from having to testify in court or do anything like that, which judges hate as a general rule in my experience, but it's also very traumatic for the child. And so we really don't want to be dragging the child in to give testimony against their other parent, but we do want to find an appropriate way for them to be heard. A therapist can also be a great way for a child's voice to be heard, but of course that's not relevant in what I'm talking about in this video with the narcissistic aspect of the other parent. The third way, and I think this is the most commonly used method, I think, and honestly, it's the most effective one, in my opinion, based on what I have seen, okay? This third option is the one option that I have seen work when all the other options fail. Now, this option is getting a full-blown custody eval. And again, it's a little more expensive. That's probably going to cost you $5,000 to $7,000 at best. The difference between a psych eval and a custody eval is a psych eval only evaluates that parent. A custody eval will evaluate both parents plus the children. They look at the whole dynamic. They interview everybody. They do observations of both parents with the children. They do, a questionnaire. They usually do some psych testing as part of that custody eval. Most evaluators will do, unless it's like a limited evaluation or something like that. But most full-blown evaluations do include some sort of psychometric testing. So this is the one tool that I have seen my clients use with success. I have one client in particular that comes to mind a couple of years ago where, to my shock, the custody evaluator actually wrote in there that they believed that the other parent was narcissistic. Had narcissistic personality disorder. I have never seen an evaluator actually write those words into an evaluation like that myself personally. Normally, again, what we see is patterns of behavior. That's what's discussed, right? And how those impact the children, good, bad, or otherwise. That's generally the perspective they come at it from. This custody eval is very in-depth. It looks at the total picture. Again, you do have to go into court and get an order for this and get the court's permission, and they're going to decide how it's paid for and all of those things. It is not free. It is not cheap. But if you are one of the extreme situations, this is usually what most attorneys will recommend when you're dealing with things on that kind of far extreme level of the conflict and the difficulty with the other parent. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that gives you some things to think about, some ideas as to whether, there's always a cost benefit analysis, right? You have to think about how much is this going to cost versus what it's going to produce. Are the issues severe enough to get the outcome that I'm really, looking for? and is it worth spending that money? So those are all considerations that you have to try and weigh in your own individual case. And if you'd like some help doing that, you can always go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's information on that page on my group coaching programs and my one-on-one programs. You can figure out which one would be a good fit for you. And I will see you guys next time.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the